silly. I'll go ahead and call us to order and declare that we have a quorum of 7 members present for this workshop. Item C1, consideration and discussion and possible action related to attendance boundary adjustments, grandfathering, procedural considerations, and related matters. I'm going to go ahead and kind of give a little background and set the stage for why we're here. And kind of start from the beginning. Because of overcrowding at College Station High School, the board was faced with a choice between either asking voters for additional bond money to expand College Station High School or to move students to Consol, where we have existing capacity that was already built and paid for. The board opted to move students, so we moved students from the overcrowded high school to our high school with existing space, and we were able to do so without requiring any current high school students to change schools. Even with the actions that we took, it's projected that there will likely be portables at College Station High School every year until either its expansion is completed or we have a third high school built. After weeks of consideration and after receiving considerable feedback in the form of personal phone calls and conversations, emails, and public comments at meetings from literally hundreds of people across the district, and many of which focus directly on grandfathering options. And after an intense discussion that lasted almost an hour and a half, the board voted to approve the grandfathering plan that was recommended by the administration in our first meeting in this rezoning process. There's been a great deal of misinformation and uncertainty that has been circulated and is circulating throughout our community. And even though the Board of Trustees made final decisions concerning the boundary adjustment process on April 19th, there has been a formal request to have the matters placed on a board agenda so that the board can revisit its decisions. Due to the importance and timing of upcoming events designed to assist students affected by boundary changes, it is important for the board as a governing body to make its intentions on these matters clear as soon as possible, and to avoid any confusion that may be caused by the words or actions of any single member. This is the only way that we can act as a group in a public meeting. We must be definitive and act with clarity so that our students and their families can make the best possible decisions moving forward. Accordingly, I called today's meeting instead of waiting until our regularly scheduled meeting on May 15th. Now, as for the matters at hand, there are some who believe that the board did not have sufficient information to make its decisions and that the board wants to change its previous decision concerning grandfathering. So today, I think it's important that the board confirm answers to 2 questions. Does the board feel that it needs additional information concerning grandfathering, either from a public forum or otherwise? And secondly, does the board wish to change its previous decision concerning grandfathering? My answer to both is no. And it's not a maroon thing versus a purple thing. It's not anything related to a particular neighborhood's revenge. My views are not out of spite or vengeance or any of that type of stuff. And it's not some reaction to people who have tried to demonize us to legitimize our decision. And it's not a reaction to us being attacked as a board or as individuals. One thing I want to be clear about to the board and to the people that are here observing our meeting today, that I'm not talking about the majority of the communications we received. Most of the communications we received had what I've termed thoughtful advocacy. And whether they were for or against our decisions, quite frankly, these communications were great. And here's why. Every time I read one, and I read every single one, and I think you all probably did too, but every time I read one, as I went through it, I revisited our decisions and my thought process, and I made sure that my analysis still made sense to me. My answers to the questions, again, were no, and it's not for any of those inappropriate reasons. And I will ask you this, if you have those in your heart, I ask you to put them aside today. I am where I am because I think we made the correct decision through a good, deliberative process. When we voted on the 19th, I felt good about the information I had to make the decision, and I haven't seen or heard anything that changes my views. In fact, the hundreds of emails, and as I said, I've read every single one now as of 10:30 this morning. All the social media posts, I have seen some and tried to avoid most, and subsequent media coverage have all confirmed for me that I had properly identified the issues as well as the trade-offs involved in the decision we had to make. I did hear in those communications about some specific individual situations that I think will likely warrant some special consideration, but there are processes in place to deal with those, and there are good people to make sure that they're handled appropriately. But these specific individual situations cannot be allowed to dictate policy. The evening we voted, there's a reason that members of this board felt such strong emotion. There were people with tears in their eyes or tears running down their cheeks. And it's because we knew the vote was not just about numbers. We knew it was about kids. We knew it was about their families and the hardships associated with change. We knew it was about individual stories. The stories that we've heard about, but also those that we haven't heard. It was with this very real human impact in mind that the board made the decision it determined to be in the best interest of the district as a whole, and I still feel the same way. I respect that there are those who disagree with me and with the decision of the board, but I also respect and support the decision of the majority as the decision of the board. And unless it is the will of the majority of this board, it is not my intention to rehash the discussion or the decision that has already been made. At this point, in my view, it's time to move forward. Mrs. Barrett, you asked if you could say a few words, so I'm done.
Oh, okay.
Well, for now.
Well, I just wanted to say that I went back and watched the meetings where we went through the discussion, and particularly watched the meetings where we were reaching the decision of what we needed to do about the overcrowding at College Station High School. I felt at that time, and still do feel, that in order for good education to take place and for our students to have the best possible way to learn, that they needed to not be in an overcrowded situation when we had where we had space at another high school. And one of the things that kept coming up was that we talked about both high schools being so good, and that we weren't asking anyone to go from one place to the other that wasn't good. And so as we went through that, one of the discussions, we discussed many ways that we could avoid actually rezoning. There was a lot of really good conversation about what were some other things that we could do. We threw out that we could have a 9th and 10th grade campus, an 11th and 10th grade campus. We decided that wasn't a good option. We talked about in a joking manner that we could do, every other address. I mean, we just really tried to look at so many different aspects of what we could do without having to move kids. And then we talked about temporary buildings, and there's a good piece of information or good conversation about that. And we talked about we could do nothing, but that was doing something because we were going to have to bring in more temporary buildings. At that time, it was storming that day, and we made comment about the storm that day and about the kids would have to be out in the elements unnecessarily. We also talked in view of the safety perspective at that point that while it's not unsafe to have temporary buildings, it was brought out by Mr. Schaefer that he said security was more important than the rain. But even though rain was a problem, but that safety was certainly an issue. And while I don't think they're unsafe, I do think it's more safe to have kids. And those kinds of comments and those kinds of things were a part of the decision of the greater whole of the decision for the district. There are so many pieces to this very intricate decision. And I'm one of those that had tears in my eyes because I do know that it affects the kids, but I also know that I was voted here to do what was best for the district as a whole. And so I didn't realize you were going to ask 2 questions, so I hope that this is the right way to do this. But I had this myself. I don't feel that we need any more information to make our decision. And I want to move that we affirm the board's decision from April 19th.
I'd like to second that motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second.
I'd like to make some comments.
Additional discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Schaefer.
Okay. I have my thoughts written down, so if you don't mind entertaining me as I read them. I think once this whole process, I think there's people that have come to the table at different times. So as I have my notes, I think it's things that I'd like for everybody to hear. Since we met last time, there's been much said, much fact, some fiction. We all voted, and it was emotional, and I think we owe the community to know that there was much thought in our decision-making process. I can promise everybody that the view is much different in this chair. I would like to start out by talking about my commitment to education. My career in education started in kindergarten when I was 5 years old. Whether I was a student in a public school system, a student in college, grad school, a member of a faculty or administration, and now as a school board member, the longest time since I was in kindergarten that I've been out of education has been 10 months. I think I might have a slight interest in education. Our district is facing considerable challenges, whether it's growing pains. Yes, we have opened 5 new schools in the last 5 years, or how we decide to meet the financial demands of our district with basically no help from the state. If there's going to be outrage in this community, that is where it should start. But the one thing that we should all be proud of is that we have no such thing as a bad school at College Station ISD. We are where we are right now, and it's mainly due to growth and attendance boundaries. As we read and listened from our community, the hot topics on zoning was proximity and distance to schools, comparability, continuity, and one of the words that makes me cringe is grandfathering. There's no doubt that this process has been tough and emotional on all of us. In my opinion, for the most part, all we've done is move the chairs on the Titanic. And unfortunately, the iceberg is still out there. This is not saying that we did not try. The 7 of us, actually the 9 of us, agreed on new attendance boundaries for what we thought would be the best for our district, knowing that we could not, and I mean not, please everyone. FC Local. Man, what a title. It's subject to school attendance areas. It was designed to help future boards, and again, it was designed to help future boards and administrations with tools to manage school makeup and to manage enrollment capacity. This policy states that every December, the administration will review and share with the board data such as current and future student, school demographics, facility usage, enrollments, and capacity projections. Since January, this group has been in the process for this very first time with this FC Local. And does it need tweaks and adjustment? Yes. To me, the biggest flaw is the timing of the report, and that's why I believe we are here today. I know that's why I'm here today. Guys, if you could, please don't clap. Let me just get through this, please. The timing is what makes me struggle the most and why I feel the need to grandfather eighth graders. This is why I made the decision I did. This affects students going to both high schools, not just one of them. And where do I even start when it comes to transportation? Not everyone is fortunate enough to have his or her own transportation. As I struggled with this, I started thinking to myself, what is it like to be younger? How do we know what's happening in these kids' homes? You know, we hear words like truancy, lockdowns, bullying, cyberbullying, resource officers. There's also labeling. It seems like everyone and everything has a label today. You know, you look at the peer pressure with these kids, I mean, that's tough enough. But then throw a label like ADD, OCD, bipolar, dyslexic, gay, gothic, and the list goes on. We start talking about a lot of the mental health issues that I think that were neglected in this country. I think anybody in this room would have to agree in the last 10 years would be naive to think that there's not more students taking some type of prescribed anxiety and depression medicines. What about the recent mass shootings in schools? As of April 20th this year, there have been 20 school shootings resulting in injury or death just this far this year. What about the number of students in the Brazos Valley that have been charged with terroristic threats? What about kids bringing weapons to school? Want to talk about suicide? The suicide rate for the last 10 years on girls from 15 to 19 has doubled. It's the highest it's been in 40 years. You look at the suicide rate for boys the same age, it's increased 30 years. Does somebody want to mention drugs? For heaven's sake, at the last school board meeting, what are we talking about? Drug testing program for our schools. So I struggle when I hear that kids are strong, tough, and resilient, not just at eighth grade, but any grade. And then I get to the end, grandfathering. As I mentioned at the last meeting, my daughter was separated from her kids, her friends at 7th grade. We drove her to school and picked her up because she would have been the first one picked up on the bus and the last one dropped off. Yes, it was easily a 7 to 5 day for her. I think just for the side note for some of the snide comments I had, I think that's constantly the question that I've always asked about the drive time on buses. I mean, I lived it. Yes, her grades dipped, and I can remember asking my wife, what kind of style trends is it where the kids are wearing black makeup, black clothes, black shoes, black lipstick, black fingernail polish, and the like. Allison could tell you that year she had no friends. And when we talk about wall walkers, my daughter was one of those. We were very fortunate to get a waiver that next year, and she was returned with her friends. She graduated from Consol and from Texas A&M with honors and is now a kindergarten teacher. Although she has many friends, she subconsciously is very insecure about upsetting a friend or a family member, largely to think that she does not have many because of that long year that she felt alone. At this point, I hope some of you can understand why I struggled with grandfathering. Whether it's right or wrong, this is where Michael's at. To me, it's not 58, it's not 158, it just has to be one. And that one to prevent a child from experiencing not to have that one person experience what my daughter went through. It is not helping us today, but some future good news, I think we need to have some good news, is Dr. Eagley stated in the last meeting that in 2 years, with the addition of the third middle school and with the splits, there would be a natural transition so a student shouldn't be going to a school where they don't know anyone. As Mr. Martindale stated at the last opening of College Station High School, that this transition for sophomores was tough. They needed more emotional nurturing. My question that I've asked myself, are we creating the same environment by not grandfathering? To me, the biggest part of grandfathering is the timing. The timing, the timing. We have kids that signed up for classes, received their degree plans, did their tours, did their tryouts, made the teams, and even purchased uniforms. All they know was a maroon or purple track. Can we blame them for this? We created these tracks. We should be so grateful that they are so proud of their school and their school spirit. What did we do to them? We yanked those away to no fault of their own. Our community is very supportive of our schools. I think that's obvious. You look at the Education Foundation. The thing that divides us the most is drawing attendance zones, and which one of the excellent schools that our children will go to. I felt like I needed to say my piece, and as I mentioned in the last meeting, the grandfathering vote was very emotional to me. It was the easiest decision I made. Majority is what majority is. But I can promise you, I made my vote, and it wasn't because I was tired. But if one wants to talk about tired, I am. And I'm done.
Any other discussion?
I didn't know what to fully expect today when we got together. And I think you spoke for all of us when you said you're tired. At least for me. You asked two questions at the beginning, Mr. Harris, and I agree. I don't believe any of us need more information. I think we had plenty. When the decision was made, I think there is a misconception that this hadn't been talked about or we hadn't gotten community input. But before that, was it the 19th when we were here? In fact, the first few emails I got, the first person who spoke at the community forum, it was about grandfathering the 8th graders. And while we've gotten a lot of information in the last 2 weeks, it's there hasn't been much new information. It's been a lot of the same, which I understand. I mean, this is not a super complex issue. It is what it is. So I don't think we need more information at community forum or anything like that. And as far as if I have changed my decision, I mean, I've not. I still believe that it would be in the best interest to grandfather the 8th graders. And I know I'm in a minority there. And but with that said, I do want people to hear this and to know this. There's been a lot of misinformation. And I don't believe for a second that I respect everyone at this table. I don't question anyone's heart or anyone's integrity. We disagree on this. And we should be able to disagree and walk away from the table and shake hands and still respect one another. And I do. And I do. And it grieves me that and I understand it's an emotional thing. I really didn't think I was going to cry today, but there it is. It grieves me that the community seems so divided. And one thing I'm fairly certain of now, there's no decision this board can make that will heal it. That healing's going to have to come from somewhere else. I do believe that healing can come, but I don't believe it's going to come from a decision here. I would like to say that really the thing I came in here, what's tearing me apart is the timing. The timing is extremely difficult. I know we talked about this at great length 2 weeks ago. as a policy, I agree with FC Local, but I do believe that at some point, I would like to say, I think it should be looked at as a board as far as making an adjustment for the timing. It may not help us now, but it's going to help us down the road. And I'm done.
I would concur with Mr. Nugent that this has been a highly difficult process. I think we've been blamed for a lot of stuff. At the end of the day, I accepted my role on the board and agreed to make what I thought decisions that were in the best interest of the district as a whole. And in any rezoning effort, regardless of what happens, people who get moved believed that we're not making decisions in the best interests of the kids and that we are making decisions based on numbers. And I would say part of our job as board members is to make decisions based on numbers. I went back and I watched our discussion on grandfathering, and I think it's hard in that, we are working through a process where we are forming our own opinions and trying to gather data to make our decisions. We are not having board workshops to try to explain things clearly to the public. That's not why they're there. Obviously, they're open and anybody can come watch them. But at the end of the day, College Station High School is over capacity. It just is. And that stinks. And that brings a lot of trials and tribulations to the staff that are there. In order to squeeze people in this last year, and there's going to be a lot more people there next year, regardless of the decision that we make. They are on rotating teacher schedules, which is hard on our faculty. They are often on using rooms that are not designed for teaching as teaching rooms. I have had parents talk to me about kids literally sitting on the top of tables because there's not a chair for them in the room. I have heard we recognize this is a difficult decision. And anyways, I made the decision with full knowledge and full information, and I made a decision that I believe is in the best interest of the district. And I understand that there are people that are going to disagree with that, and you're more than welcome to do it, but it just is what it is. So.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to affirm the board's decision from April 19th and a second, and no further discussion. So I guess to be consistent on this matter, we'll do it by raising your hand. So all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, all opposed? Motion carries 5-2. And with that, we are adjourned.